Hello and welcome. It's great to have you here. If you're a marketer or an entrepreneur who is determined to tell a story that sells, then boy, do I have a treat for you today. We're going to be talking about how you can generate demand and accelerate that sales pipeline with storytelling. We're going to teach you how to do this without having to learn the specialist, confusing entertainment frameworks. You know what I mean. We won't be teaching you the hero's journey or the 7 types of story, Kurt Vonnegut's 8 tips, Pixar's tips. You get the point. You know that great storytelling can help your business, but it's hard to find the time to become a master storyteller, and it's not your fault. Most of storytelling advice is for entertainment storytelling. And you simply don't have the time to become a master storyteller, but you do want to benefit from it. So what if I told you that I can help you by telling you one single thing that you could do that would help with all of that? That single thing is business storytelling. And my goal for this presentation is to help 2 types of people with this business storytelling. So the first one is for those natural born storytellers. You know, those folks who just get it, right? Who are used to doing it. Maybe you're a raconteur. We're going to show you how you can take your whole company on the storytelling journey, resulting in increasing that profitability with business storytelling. For those who are utterly new, don't worry, we've got something for you too. You're going to get some simple frameworks today to get going with business storytelling. So really excited for that. So in the next 60 minutes, my goal is basically to get you to believe that business storytelling is the key to unlock unrealized profitability. I'm going to show you that my proprietary frameworks that will make it simple for you to achieve that result. As a marketer and entrepreneur myself, I know how much frustration there can be in business. And for over 20 years in corporate America, I had a variety of marketing roles. I was even chief storyteller for a business division of Microsoft. For years, and even as a passionate storyteller, I struggled to apply storytelling in business. There's so much that you've got to manage in your business as it is. You might not feel that you've got time for storytelling. Well, we're going to change that today. You might also think that you need to be focusing on every single marketing channel for fear that you'll fail if you don't check all those boxes, or that you have to get on the very latest social media platform. You don't. What you need to get right is your business storytelling. Now, like many of you, I once thought storytelling was reserved for movies, books, and theater. And while I've always appreciated good storytelling, my career was actually built through science and technology. And I didn't think stories had much to do with these fields at all. However, I came to learn that storytelling propped up everything in business, for every business and in every industry. My mother was a scientist, a biologist who focused on virology and zoology. She taught my sisters and me to ask questions, develop hypotheses, and test our ideas. We were taught to seek facts, data, and truth. She was also a poet and an author. My father reinforced this, an electrical engineer by training who enjoyed a sales and marketing career spanning 5 decades in high tech. He inadvertently indoctrinated me into the world of technology, Intel specifically. And I grew up surrounded by tales of Silicon Valley. By the way, I highly recommend Accidental Empires. It's really, really fun read about the history of Silicon Valley. We were soaked in stories from a young age. Both my parents read to us voraciously. I still have fond memories of being curled up with Dad and one of my sisters as he read us Lord of the Rings. This is actually the copy that he read to us, my mum's 1969 edition, which was the first where all the books of Lord of the Rings were published together in one volume. And so I took that passion for science and followed my mother's footsteps into creative writing and my father's footsteps into technology when I started my career in Intel's marketing department. Any fans of Red Dwarf in the audience? This is a 2002 shot from an Intel Counter-Strike gaming event that I helped manage at the Science Museum in London. And yes, that is Lister from Red Dwarf. In the early days of my career, storytelling mostly seemed relegated to presentations and ad campaign ideas. I didn't explicitly see it as being something used for internal business communications or strategy or anything like that. Something else I discovered in those early days was Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm, a popular read at Intel. And I loved how it framed this idea of the chasm, how businesses that failed to connect with the early majority segment of the market would fall into this chasm. And it became a North Star for me. If business is about nothing else, it's about connecting your product or service with the most lucrative of your potential audiences and markets. And that is in the early majority. So storytelling is also about connecting people to ideas. And without realizing it, I started applying storytelling to my everyday work. In one early instance, I created a superhero theme for a partner account manager training event at Intel. In another, I created a James Bond style sales campaign. Eventually, efforts such as these led to me being internally recruited as chief storyteller for Microsoft Dynamics. Just as I was planning on leaving the company, I might add. Oh, wow, I thought it was all official. I was actually going to get paid to be a storyteller. Finishing my novels can wait. Little did I realize that the journey I was about to embark on would result in me being able to help others unlock a big business secret. At Intel, a mentor of mine, Nick Drew, once said, always find if somebody's done it before. It'll save you time and energy. In other words, don't reinvent the wheel if you can avoid doing so. I've always kept that in mind, and as such, was keeping an eye out for existing approaches as this newly minted chief storyteller. I sought to do the same in my new role and went on the hunt for these existing wheels, but honestly, I struggled. I had turned this external job offer down to take this role, and I really, really wanted to make it work. People have been trying to apply storytelling to business as a way to cross the chasm, but there was a problem with how they were approaching it. Now, to be clear, there are some really interesting advice and information out there that uses storytelling. For example, I found a ton of fascinating information and frameworks for storytelling born out of hundreds of years of story crafting in literature and film. Joseph Campbell's Hero Journey, to name but one famous framework. Even Pixar has an approach. In my exploration, I also found useful approaches to helping with improving presentations. I loved Nancy Duart's Resonate and techniques like Bo Eason's for telling your personal story for impact. As I dug into these various methods and classic storytelling models, I couldn't find the wheel that I was looking for. The available storytelling frameworks have been created for a different end goal: entertainment. And it's not surprising stories are entertaining. It's not surprising an industry was born out of it. The hero's journey can be 10, 12, or even a whopping 17 steps. Phrases like rising and falling action, a character arc. These were just too much of a heavy lift for business professionals. No matter how many rabbit holes I went down, I just couldn't find a storytelling wheel that worked for the repeatable application of storytelling in business. As Chip and Dan Heath explain in their wonderful book, Made to Stick, we're all subject to this thing called the curse of knowledge. This curse makes it hard for people outside of our areas of expertise to understand what we simply get. What is effortless for us requires much energy for a non-expert. Storytelling is no different. The wheels just were not rolling, so I decided to focus on the essence of storytelling. I would use the entertainment industry frameworks and be a story interpreter, a focus on outside-in customer centricity, and a focus on the customer as the hero on their journey to hopefully purchase from us. My team and I created some terrific showcase films that focused on the customer and their experience. This only reinforced for me how powerful storytelling is. I was discovering more than ever that the power of story wasn't limited to movies and to books. This is how we as humans are connected. And since business is still human to human, I realized storytelling played an essential role in internal and external business connections. And I was experiencing storytelling's impact across all of the business. But I felt like I was only scratching the surface. And I wanted to go further than just injecting elements of story into traditional marketing approaches. I started to wonder what actual business storytelling wheels might look like. And I was inspired to take my experience outside of my corporate role and start my own company to put all my energy into helping businesses with storytelling. But I had a young family at home and my wife was on sabbatical from her career after the birth of our second child. He's a bit older than this now. Quitting wasn't an option. Everything changed on July the 19th, 2015. Tragedy struck. I received the phone call that nobody ever wants. There's been a car crash. Your father's dead and your mother is in critical condition. Several hours later, we also lost my mother. It took a long time to come to terms with this and to heal. And I won't go any further into this sad tale, but do know if you've experienced anything like this, I have resources available that I can connect you with. So don't hesitate to reach out. The fact that life is short was never more apparent to me. My wife had just gone back to work, but ended up resigning. She didn't just have 2 young boys at home to take care of. She also had a fully grown man who was hanging on to reality by a thread. It was against this backdrop of profound grief that I left Microsoft. What on earth was I thinking? Well, I tapped into the inner resources I've been gifted by my mother and my father. Creativity, technology, a love of storytelling. And I honored them in the best way that I know how, helping others find success in their business with the power of storytelling. That's why I formed Go Narrative. I started working on those business storytelling wheels so you don't have to. And it's true that I founded Go Narrative as a way to help businesses use the power of storytelling. The thing is marketers and entrepreneurs are a creative bunch. You're always looking for the best ways to reach potential customers. And there's a problem though with this. With being this creative and this interested in all these approaches, it can result in this mix of check every box syndrome and the bright, shiny object syndrome. And trust me, I'm particularly familiar with the last one myself. The truth is you don't need to check all those boxes, including the latest fancy social media channels. What you need is better storytelling. A big misconception of storytelling is that it's just for children, movies, and books. It's not. Those are just artifacts of what storytelling is really all about. And if some artifacts can be for pure entertainment, some can be for business engagement. When you apply storytelling, your messaging is better, your executives are more relatable, your salespeople have increased confidence, you generate increased demand, and you accelerate your sales pipe velocity. And everything's more aligned. Sounds good, right? I'd seen this power and I wanted to spread the word. But honestly, I found the entertainment frameworks pretty hard to apply to business. And I wanted to save you that hassle. Because of this, and even after the initial founding of Go Narrative, I relied on existing frameworks. As I worked to decide and decode what storytelling for business looked like, I prioritized the concept of this idea of a strategic messaging foundation. I used my experience creating value propositions, positioning frameworks, personas, customer journeys, and content marketing. Selling these things was a great place to start, and we made good money doing it. But business storytelling was still the crown jewel that I was after. Literature and film benefited from the hero's journey or Blake Snyder's Save the Cat, but these are just artifacts of what storytelling really is. I knew it was more than that. I was determined to find an approach for business. I knew storytelling is how we make sense of the world, and you want your customers to make sense of you, don't you? But without that simple, practical business frameworks, I continued to play the role of business interpreter. The more I practiced the art and science of storytelling, the more I realized storytelling is a value problem. And in business is all about value, the value you bring to clients. For our ancestors, the stories of value were told around the campfire. Value was things like which berries were edible and where the shelter was. Evolution did its thing and rewarded with survival the tribes that practiced storytelling. Now, there are a few important things people get wrong with business storytelling. I discovered 2 cardinal sins. The first sin is not including people and their transformation. This holds true even when the story is short form content like a tweet or ad copy. I thought back to my time in corporate America, and one time I was sitting in this crowd of employees as an executive took the stage at a corporate all hands meeting. "We have a great story," he called out. The crowd was buzzing. This executive had just been promoted to CMO, and the all hands was his moment. "And I'll tell you what it is." The crowd leaned in. "Our products work great together, and our new SKUs are priced exactly at what our customers need." Wait, what? I waited for a story. Nothing. This was the CMO. There was no story. The presentation wasn't structured around story. There were a few anecdotes, but that was it. And this was only one example of where I was seeing the term story being abused in business. It was a product strategy, a marketing priority. It wasn't a story. Focus on logic and argument, and you inspire your audience to argue with you. Stories are about people and their overcoming of obstacles, about transformation. This is the why of storytelling. What's the second sin? Not including a what, an element of value. It's the whole point of storytelling, to deliver valuable information. When you do, your audience can act on a transformation that can lead them to a better life. And they see this for the first time simulated in a story. When we hear a story, our brain actually simulates the events in our minds. It teaches us how to create similar real-world experiences. It shows us how life can be better. I love this quote from Jonathan Gottschall. "Fiction is an ancient virtual reality technology that specializes in simulating human problems." But I was still struggling to apply the common storytelling entertainment structures to business. So I continued playing the interpreter role while focusing on our work of crafting strategic messaging foundations. But the dream was real. What if I could forge story frameworks specifically for business people? My mother's earliest memory was her grandfather, my great-grandfather, taking her and her sisters down into his smithy. He was a blacksmith, under pain of death should they tell their mother, my grandmother. She would not have been happy. My mother was only 5 years old. My great-grandfather helped them lift up the hammer, crashing it down onto the hot metal. Sparks flew, smoke filled the room. The horseshoe was thrust into the water to temper it, then back into the forge and hit again. Forging things takes work. It was through this experience that I forged these frameworks so you don't have to. I now find myself on this mission to find a way to simplify and unlock storytelling for business, to do so in a way that was accessible. And I did it. I created a set of tools to enable business people to find success through storytelling. And here's the kicker: without relying on any entertainment frameworks. Simple, accessible, memorable. Memorizing a bunch of detail can be a heavy lift. It reminds me of my computer science and business degree. I had a fair amount of memorizing, like marketing. Things like the 4 Ps and cash cows. To be fair, there was a lot we had to learn. Maybe you've been there too. We have to remember and recall so many things on a daily basis, right? So many things for success. And we have all these plates we've got to spin. Having to keep all those plates spinning can be tricky. And every time, like for example, Twitter releases a new feature, I get anxious. Am I not jumping on the bandwagon fast enough? For ages, I even tried to maintain a Go Narrative Instagram account, and just before I cut my losses and decided to focus on LinkedIn and Twitter primarily. Now, of course, there's a constant flow of new channels like TikTok and Clubhouse. And the reality is that no matter the medium, the message needs to use storytelling to be effective. And, for the first few years of Go Narrative, I relied on my story interpreter role to help our clients. And it was then that I discovered Paul Smith's tools. I started using Paul Smith's CAR framework, Context, Action, Results, from Lead with a Story. Great book. CAR helped me bridge the mental gymnastics of entertainment and frameworks with business. One of our first clients was a major financial services firm, and CAR was one of the tools we used to craft the sales deck that we were hired to create. I liked CAR, but it wasn't quite enough. With Paul Smith, however, I had found the first story structures that didn't rely on those entertainment frameworks. But it wasn't quite what I was looking for. It did, however, inspire me, and it inspired me to forge ahead with crystallizing my process and frameworks. In the end, my realization was quite simple. Stories are like salt. Salt is elemental. Without it, food is bland. Some people even think watermelon is improved with salt. You want your message to be tasty, don't you? Stories make everything tastier. I needed a tool as simple as salt, something anyone can add to their marketing dishes. And you know what? None of these tools, channels, or features matter if they're not tasty, right? Storytelling is an essential element, essential ingredient, just like salt. Don't prioritize all the channels. Prioritize storytelling, then the channels. Now, some of you might be thinking, Matthew, too much salt is a bad thing. Yes, it is. And that's exactly the problem with entertainment storytelling frameworks for business and why they fail in business. They bring too much salt. To avoid this, I prioritize a focus on 3 things. Number 1, focus on the customer as the hero. Use personas to help guide this. Number 2, demonstrate the overcoming of the challenges that those personas or people had. And 3rd, focus less on products and services and more on the people whose lives your products impact. If you do nothing else, do this. It'll keep you outside in honest. This focus, along with my storytelling interpreter role, really were used initially for sales presentations, websites, and other content such as these examples. Before we knew it, we were creating strategic narratives as a part of our strategic messaging framework and foundations for the go-to-market playbooks we were creating for clients. They were accompanied by value propositions, positioning frameworks, personas, buyer journeys, and content strategies. And I was finally feeding a family of 4, despite having shed the shackles of corporate America. The cool thing about personas, positioning frameworks, and so on is that they're the business components of business storytelling. So our strategic messaging foundation really became this way of this key, if you will, unlocking the ability to rewrite storytelling for business, moving away from those entertainment frameworks. And when our clients invested in these playbooks, they see real results. You know, a mid-sized IT firm saw consistency and unity in all of their effort across marketing, sales, and consulting delivery that they'd never seen before. A corporate client saw over 40% increase in registrations for their event series. Another client saw campaign landing page improvements. Inbound and search engine impact was 3.78 increase in page views, and conversions was 7.35 times increased. The whole point of these frameworks was to craft useful tools that we could use with anyone and that you can use yourself to help you and your product stand out, to make what you say and do interesting. I love helping our clients find that better way to connect with their customers. And I found all this through storytelling. And it's really no surprise, right? Our brains are wired for it. Our society is built on it. And the good news is that you don't need every single latest social media tool or platform to find success. Whatever platform you're using, you can use storytelling to make it tastier. It's that secret that I'm about to share. In fact, it's 3 secrets. One false belief that I have seen is that storytelling may be a powerful way to communicate. It may be entertaining, but it's just too hard to apply to our business. I mean, I experience that, right? Every time I try to use the hero's journey in my marketing, it's just too complicated. It's too much to lift. I have enough to worry about already, and folks end up just not doing it. So that leads us to secret number 1, a quick and easy story hack to increase profitability without learning all the nuances of entertainment storytelling. Another false belief that we hear is people sold on storytelling and they understand the frameworks, but they still can't create stories that work. My stories just don't have a heart. I have so many product benefits to get across. I can't find, let alone fit in, realistic emotions that will make my stories interesting. Hence, secret number 2, a way to build and tell confident business stories that connect with the hearts and the minds of your customers. There's another false belief. I get it, but I just can't get the support, the funding, the internal political clout that I need because I can't show how storytelling connects to the business or how all these stories that we need to be telling in the business all connect and align so the horses are pulling the wagon in the same direction. And that leads us to secret number 3. Tell the right story to connect to your audience, connect your audience to your product, move your customers to act, and get the support that you need to do so. Let's talk about secret number 1. Take out your pen and paper for some notes, because I'm going to walk you through this framework, which I call the 3D story framework. Now, I seek to avoid reinventing the wheel wherever possible, and on my hunt for existing wheels, I found tons of fascinating information and frameworks for storytelling. They were born out of hundreds of years of story crafting in literature and the movie industries. The hero's journey, overcoming the monster, and save the cat. Even Pixar has one, right? But again, these were for entertainment storytelling, because books and movies are just artifacts of what storytelling truly is. I couldn't find any how-to for applying to business and marketing in a repeatable manner. I couldn't find the wheel I was looking for. I wanted a wheel that worked in a repeatable application of storytelling in business. Remember those movie and book story models? They can be quite detailed. Joseph Campbell's 10, 12, or even 17 steps hero's journey. Phrases like rising and falling action and character arc. They're just too much of a heavy lift for busy business professionals. And as we discussed, we are all subject to the curse of knowledge, right? Coined by Chip and Dan Heath and made to stick. This curse makes it hard for non-experts to understand what we simply get. Storytelling is no different, and I was running into the risk of getting sucked into the storytelling curse of knowledge. I knew that I had to keep forging if I was going to unlock the secret. Besides, I could develop if I could develop these frameworks, I could use them to speed up our client work, right? But forging frameworks can be tricky. When I worked at Microsoft, I created a patent for our Customer Engagement Accelerator, a technology designed to make Microsoft Dynamics even better. Creating a patent isn't easy. You need to be very detailed in the technical flow of information, processing it, managing outputs, storing data, amongst other things. What brought it all together for me was looking at it through the lens of storytelling, through the eyes of our hero, the user. I was lucky to have had this experience because it helped me crystallize what I needed to do with our Go narrative frameworks, and then to unlock the true power of story structure simply. The good news is you don't have to take the time to go through all these books and frameworks in an effort to learn all of this about storytelling and figure out how to apply it in business, because I've done it for you. Good news, right? The thing is, I wanted to retain the interest and excitement of the entertainment frameworks and to ensure that what I created could help with strategy as much as it did with crafting campaigns, training sales teams, or creating content. I truly believe the right frameworks can help you take your storytelling destiny into your own hands, even if you don't think you're a natural born storyteller and your brain just isn't wired in that way. That's fine. The right frameworks will help you apply it in your business, be it for marketing, leadership, product management, or even internal politics. Practical, useful frameworks. Where we live in Seattle is surrounded by water. The archipelago of Puget Sound has over 170 islands. My wife and I fantasize about living on one, and we've done so for years. Recently, we saw a property go on sale on Vashon Island. It checked a lot of boxes, so we booked time to see it that weekend, packed the kids in the car, and headed to the ferry terminal. A new construction, but it had issues. The sellers had run out of money, and it showed. I've owned 3 homes. My parents owned a 450-year-old farmhouse. Houses take a lot of work, especially when they're 450 years old and made out of the same stones as Stonehenge. But if the foundation is good, a house can last 450 years. The house on Vashon was peppered with warning signs. It reminded me of my mission to simplify storytelling for business and help business people benefit from it without being an expert. And that would require 3 things. 1, it needed that well-built foundation. Secondly, it needed to be a simple, accessible tool. And it needed to be easy to apply repeatably and practically. Get your storytelling right, and you don't have to worry as much about what channel or marketing method you're using. The right business storytelling framework will help you get attention, get heard, and result in action being taken. Storytelling for action. For internal alignment, for pitching your ideas to your boss, for exploring product strategy, for crafting product positioning, for defining a strategic narrative for your whole company, and, of course, for your campaigns and your messaging. When you get the foundation right, you go beyond just the telling. Campbell and Snyder wanted to help authors and filmmakers craft stories with multiple characters, desires, transformations, and learnings. I want to help you use storytelling in business. Your craft is your unique business. Your craft isn't storytelling. Even natural-born storytellers can benefit from structures designed for business that helps with a practical application. People should be able to enjoy living in a beautiful home with no worries about the state of the foundation, safe in the knowledge that it was well built. By the way, that house eventually sold for 20% less than the list price in a market where bidding wars are driving everything up. Okay, so you ready for the framework? Here it is, our first framework, the 3D story framework. It's practical and straightforward. It helps you see your story from all angles. Nike's Just Do It inspired me, packing a whole lot of punch into just 3 words, packing in important stuff in a way that represents more than those 3 words. 3D stands for desire, difficulty, and denouement. In a nutshell, people, your hero, your customer, want something. That's their desire. But life isn't easy and things stand in the way and crop up as we try. That's your difficulty. And I chose the fancy French word denouement because it means the untangling of the knot. What a wonderful metaphor. How was it untangled? With what? Was a specific approach or product used? In my story journey, I knew the importance of contrast, change, and transformation. I also knew that every business decision is a transformation, big or small. And if people could easily understand the why and the how of another person's solution to such a transformation, they could also be persuaded to follow the same path, a path to purchase from you. We designed our 3D story framework to be deceptively simple, a rich microcosm of nuances, details, and context packed in to just 3 simple words, much like Nike's Just Do It tagline. For all those years as a story interpreter for business, I knew that if you just pulled on the correct threads, you'd extract what was needed to construct a business story. A good story puts you or your customer at the center, and those 3 words do just that. They tease transformation. They present it in such a way that allows you to see it from every angle and every single detail as you dig into it and look at it from all perspectives. It should come as no surprise. We use this every single day in our own marketing, our sales conversation, and of course, with the content we create for our clients. We use it for many things, but here's a great example of a landing page of above the fold copy that utilizes the 3D framework. We also use it as a practical tool to break down value propositions based on real customer stories in our workshops. We use it to create Train the Trainer guides with an outside-in perspective. And we use it to coach our clients on quickly and easily telling stories without the baggage of entertainment story frameworks. While it may be true that we're all natural-born storytellers to some extent, it's also true that it's different spinning a yarn about somebody cutting you off on the motorway than it is to define the strategic narrative for an energy compliance company. The latter is quite harder. I love this quote from Ben Horowitz. Storytelling is important, but it does take work. With a 3D framework, you have an easy on-ramp to understanding and applying storytelling today. I'm excited at its simplicity because it means it's easier for you to remember and therefore easier for you to practice and apply. We had finally found a way to make using storytelling more accessible to business people, and I was so excited to have done so. Okay, great. So you have our story structure down, you're ready to start using it, and you're ready to start riffing out some stories. You're already thinking about it, that next conversation you've got and how you're going to use that lovely, simple framework. Stories need emotion. We have to feel a story. Remember earlier, I told you about the framework we developed that helped me infuse emotions into business storytelling? Well, here's that framework, and we call it the story meet method. We're going to talk about it now. You might be thinking, oh, this sounds great, but you might also be asking yourself if you can apply it in a way that truly connects, right? And moves people to act. Well, one thing we also hear from folks is they get the power of storytelling, but they just don't feel confident creating stories with that emotional punch. They say it's hard to humanize and create the proper tension in a way that connects with people and that isn't controversial. Now, when you follow the very detailed hero's journey, it leads you through things like a call to adventure, crossing thresholds, tests, allies, enemies, innermost caves, ordeals and resurrections, right? Curse of knowledge stuff. It's no surprise that business people tune this stuff out, let alone then struggle applying storytelling with an emotional punch in business. I experienced this as my time as a story interpreter. I was worried the stories I crafted wouldn't have the emotional punch to engage our audience. I agonized over it, and I don't want you to have to agonize over it. When I delivered our first strategic narrative, I was on pins and needles. What would they think of the narrative metaphor that I had chosen of an eagle soaring? Would all that crafted to engage emotionally, would it fall flat? Thankfully, they loved it. There's a magical feeling I get from zeroing in on a narrative metaphor that works, that connects, that resonates. I was lucky enough that my grandmother lived in the same village as my parents in her twilight years. That meant I got to see her on my visits back from university. I struggled at university. Maybe it was because of my bright, shiny object syndrome I mentioned earlier. Maybe it was my ADHD and my dyslexia. Either way, I found it really tough. One day on a visit back home, I had stopped by my grand's house for a cup of tea. Ain't no party like Manana's tea party. Some of you might get this Flight of the Conchords reference. Matthew, she said, if degrees were easy, they would hand them out after A-levels. A-levels, the equivalent of the last 2 years of high school in the US. But she was right. It made me think of that forge story of my mother's. And no, I didn't spill the beans to my gran about my mum in the smithy. I kept my gran's comments in mind, though. Nothing worth working for is a handout. And if I could do the hard work, the forging for you, I could get you to story success more quickly. You know, entertainment story frameworks have a highly formal, detailed structure. The biggest problem I see with this highly formal, detailed structure is that it hampers creativity as you struggle to check all the boxes because you're not used to that particular application in industry. In business, this distracts from something critical to storytelling. Emotions. It was during the early days of COVID, just over a year ago, the importance of the right emotions in business stories really crystallized and became obvious to me. I was doing my best with the rest of the planet at the time to keep calm and carry on. And I was on the hunt for ways to ensure that we were really careful in how we respected the intense emotional landscape of the time. Now, let's talk about emotions for a second and how they affect everything. Our family loves Star Wars. We were even talking about this very Millennium Falcon this morning. We love the originals, the prequels, the sequels, the toys. We have more Star Wars Lego than you can shake a stick at. I even met George Lucas twice. But that's another story. I remember reading an article about the lightsaber battles in Star Wars and how the actors had to practice. You know, for many of them, sword fighting was a new experience. Each character brought their own inimitable style to the sword play. It wasn't just parry, block, slice. There was an art, emotion to it, and each character was different. Christopher Lee played the character of Count Dooku. No, this isn't him in Star Wars. Sword play wasn't new for Christopher Lee. He had played sword fighting roles before many of us were even born. In fact, this photograph is from the 1973 Three Musketeers. So in Christopher Lee's case, his classic, elegant style was integrated into his Star Wars character. To breathe life into a story, you must infuse technique and science with character, art, and emotion. Just like Christopher Lee breathed life into Count Dooku's lightsaber battling style. The place to start is by asking, what truths is the transformation or change relating to in the world, and what is it forcing on your customers? The good news is that I created a way to help you quickly add emotion to your business stories. Better yet, you don't have to be a literary genius or award-winning director to do so. That's why I created the Story Meet method. You can pull out this framework and use it to infuse emotions into any business story. It's your iceberg hack to bringing emotions into your business. Morals, essential emotions, and truths. What Meet enables is a quick way to connect to the things that people care about in business. And your customers care about things. Morals shape and guide businesses' donations, even collaboration culture within a company. Essential emotions ooze out of all interactions in a business. Elation for success fear for career snafus, excitement for ideation and collaboration. Truths frame up a business. Things are just a certain way sometimes. This can be affected by the industry they're in, the founders, headquarters, country, and lots more. When you hold something dear, think about your specific emotional response when it's threatened with transformation. Use the story meet method to meet your customers where they are. If you can understand what moves people, you can craft things that result in action. And emotions are key. With Meet, you don't need to maintain all the steps of the hero's journey to tap into that emotion. Just start pulling at the thread with the story meet method, and you will unravel the complex cardigan of emotions in no time at all. Emotions, getting the emotions right in storytelling, it builds empathy, which creates the conditions for engagement. And I'm so excited to be sharing these simple frameworks with you so you can unlock the practical power of storytelling for business. And there's no greater feeling of success that we get when we impact people's lives, like when people say things like Hannah from Ann Plus did. This is a sort of quote of and client response that we just absolutely adore. Remember earlier when I told you about the framework we developed that helped me tell the right stories, bring consistency to stories, and help with all that internal alignment, supporting marketing, increasing demand, and accelerating the sales pipeline? Okay, now I'm going to walk you through this framework. I call it the TRIPS storytelling methodology. I love storytelling, and like you, I was committed to making it work. When that chief storyteller role was offered to me, I was excited. I thought I understood it and storytelling enough to bring its power into business. But I quickly found that my efforts were met with blank stares. Kurt von Who? That's about the time I went to look for business storytelling frameworks, but came up short. The problem was I also wasn't happy with what I was finding out about the importance of storytelling. A quick Google search shows plenty of people explaining storytelling and how it works, even the why of how our brains work with story. But there's precious little on the why of storytelling, let alone through actual stories. Seriously, go Google storytelling and hit I'm lucky. You'll probably land on the HubSpot article, this one. Save it for later. It's not a bad read, and not to throw HubSpot under the bus, but when you read it later, you'll notice a few things. Not only is it not structured as a story, there isn't a story to be seen anywhere in it. And I'm sure you've realized by now why I'm on this mission. And I still have a lot of work to do if I'm going to get you all on this path of business storytelling. The power of story goes far, far beyond the content of storytelling. We can use it to shape the world. I remember in January of 2017, as I sat with my wife on the sofa, talking about what to call the company. I landed on Go Narrative as a name for two reasons. Firstly, I wanted to convey action, change, achievement, and transformation, hence Go. And I also knew that a story was one thing, an event unit, if you will, something that happens to someone and they transform. And I knew that enough stories together laddered up to something, to a narrative. Your favorite movie, for example, includes a collection of stories that all accrue up to the overall narrative of the film. Stories and narrative contained important structures, story structures. But I learned it's not just the telling of storytelling, hence narrative. The 3D story framework was great for helping business people with the act of storytelling and crafting content, but it fell short of something. The story meet method was excellent at finding the most relevant, valuable, and appropriate emotions, but I knew that narrative was bigger, and it wasn't just about storytelling. Narrative was about the big picture, and I had two fundamental questions. Firstly, what was the golden thread that tied all those stories together? This led me to a more profound question. How do you ensure the stories you tell are the correct stories? Stories that matter for the business, for your business, and that drive action. In my early days of solving the business storytelling problem, I became hooked. I spent much time geeking out on storytelling. I read so many storytelling books, it's crazy. You might recall how I kept running into problems to get the business benefit from storytelling, right? I remember trying to get my general manager to remember all the stages of the hero's journey. It didn't go well. I don't recommend trying to do that with your colleagues. You can almost taste the curse of knowledge, can't you? Most business people are just simply too busy to remember All of this on top of their products, marketing campaigns, sales plans, partner events, and of course, office politics. But you understand its value and you want to use it. The big question is, how do I get going? This is where the paradox of storytelling manifests. What's this paradox you talk about? Well, the paradox is a simple truth that storytelling isn't just storytelling. The driving force that results in the telling of stories is how our brain works, and precisely how it works in relation to getting along and getting ahead in society, as Will Storr says in the wonderful Science of Storytelling. The paradox doesn't end there. Even with this thing that is so natural and simple that we use it every single day, just like salt, yet so tricky that application in business constantly results in salt getting spilt. And that's the kicker of this paradox. As you learn more about it, you become subject to the curse of knowledge. Just as you start to get storytelling with all its complexity, with all the traditional entertainment frameworks, you realize that you're falling into the expertise trap. This is one of the disadvantages of trying to learn the breadth and depth of all the entertainment frameworks and then to try and apply that in business. I love how Mike Maddox likes to saying, you can't see the label from inside the jar. If you're too obsessed with the methodology, you can miss what's truly happening. And I truly believe this has happened with storytelling in business. It makes me think of a Buddhist practice I learned through meditation, the idea of beginner's mind. Our very first client was a small technology business out of California. We're doing an amazing project with them right now as well. We were crafting their strategic messaging foundation, including their narrative, value propositions, and their positioning. At the time, I was still manually working through building entertainment, kind of bridging entertainment frameworks into business concepts with that heavy focus on strategic messaging, that story interpreter role, right? Think of your favorite movie again, right? So let's see. Multiple stories all woven together into the narrative of a film. And there's a moral or a metaphor that comes out of that. In The Wizard of Oz, the narrative is that one's true purpose is found within oneself. There's no place like home, and Dorothy was there all along. The stories of the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, the Lion, all supported that narrative. They all had inside them what they sought all along. In business, you're prospecting for the inputs to your narrative. You're extracting them from employees, customers, partners, founders, all these different stories. It enables you to explore themes and connections. Then you can identify how that transformation relates to your company, your products, your people, and your customers, and then connect a narrative to it. Again, you can see this is so much more than just storytelling. The biggest problem is that people still see storytelling as for entertainment and maybe the occasional presentation. Well, they don't see it as something deeply connected to the business. What if I had a way to guide you and to help you guide your leadership team through the narrative elements in a language that they understood? That's what I was able to uncover. A way to create a strategic narrative rooted in the business without having to memorize narrative structures for entertainment. The framework is our TRIPS storytelling methodology. You might be familiar with this quote, any sufficiently advanced technology looks like magic. As I started using our narrative frameworks, there was a magical feeling about getting to the goal, not just more quickly, but with more accuracy. Plus, it was in the correct language for our clients, but it was even better than that. We were able to use the narrative framework as a sort of X-ray to see inside the business from outside in. For someone, myself, who've been championing customers and outside-in thinking for decades, it made a lot of sense. If you could see the business and break it down into a framework rooted in storytelling, you would have the tool to create a narrative for business. And there's a secret that ties all this together. Think of a brick wall. Now, imagine that wall is not multiple bricks, but a single tall, thin wall made of fired clay. Such a wall is never made. Why? It's weak. When you have multiple bricks connected by mortar, it's strong. It's to do with the way the forces are exerted on each brick by the others around it, and they enhance its strength, all held together by the mortar. A narrative is like mortar. It holds all the stories together, and together they're more robust. You undoubtedly have an idea of how you can help your prospective customers and what you can do for them. That's innovation fuel right there, that is. It's what companies are founded on, finding a better way to get a job done. It's important not to forget the why. All these things are tied together with a golden thread, all whilst framing how you can help. When we untangled the knot of denouement of the 3D story framework, we found out how a customer went through their story and found success. The fact is, your company's strategy is deeply linked to your story. In good companies, the story and the strategy are the same thing. Ben Horowitz, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. He goes on to say that the output of all that work and all that strategy is the story. A strategy without a story is an incomplete strategy. Is your strategy incomplete? With the TRIP storytelling methodology, we can ensure that those stories have a common foundation, but also are deeply connected to the business. TRIPS is an acronym. What does it stand for? T is for transformation. What change is going on in the world? How is it affecting companies, governments, people, your customer? This is the why of what you're embarking on this mission for in the first place. It's why you invented that product or developed that new business plan or crafted that marketing campaign. R is reasons to believe. What are the market facts, trends, data, the head that provides evidence of the transport? But they're not disconnected, right? Another important aspect is the heart, the aspirational state. What is the opportunity or the opportunity cost if they don't embark on the transformation? I is innovation. It's your secret sauce, your transformation winning tool. Why you? P is for problems that the transformation imposes, problems that must be overcome along the way, and even problems just getting started dealing with the transformation. And S is for stories from the world that articulates that transformation, good examples of it, social proof that shows how you can help, anecdotes, metaphors, analogies that represent the transformation and can help you act to overcome it. The reality is all of this can happen naturally, and it does. Not all the time, but it can. When entrepreneurs are so passionate about solving a business problem and they found a company, they likely go through all these steps implicitly, subconsciously. It's why unicorns exist. But again, without an approach, it's rolling of the dice. I didn't even really invent this methodology, really. I discovered it. I uncovered it. It's there. It's accessible for you to use. And in a way, not dissimilar from what Joseph Campbell went through centuries of literature to see the patterns through positioning and messaging work and storytelling, I was able to then discover the patterns of stories and narratives in business. Through the work of masters like Campbell, I was able to then crystallize business-focused frameworks, all of which benefited from the underlying brain and society reasons for why storytelling works. Then I codified it so that you can use it in a practical and repeatable manner, so you've got that guide on your journey. Now, as I said, this process can happen naturally. That doesn't mean that it will. So if you can always roll the dice if you want to, right? But you don't have to. You no longer have to cross your fingers and pray that you have the secret to doing it every time. When you craft narratives with the TRIP storytelling methodology, you will frame your strategy for transformation and how it relates to your market. You'll harvest the proper inputs for your stories. You'll have a golden thread that ties everything together to break down the topic, to put it in context, to understand the drivers, the blockers, to connect with empathy and create and show how you can take them to the promised land. To realize the transformation for themselves is what it's all about. Then with this 3D story framework, you can create stories that connect your narrative consistently, repeatably, and with the story meet method, you can find the right emotions to create stories that connect and move people to act. We put the TRIP storytelling framework at the heart of everything we do. It's our North Star to help us maintain an outside-in focus and bring consistency and repeatability to everything that we do. It's a foundation for our strategic narrative work and our strategic messaging foundation work now. In our business, we use it both internally and externally. Internally, we use it to frame how we position storytelling. So for example, externally, we use TRIP storytelling to diagnose a new client, craft our materials, coaching sessions with them, and provide the baseline for creating this and crafting their strategic narrative. For example, we'll also run workshops with a client to extract all the inputs for each trips element, and then we'll test, research, and expand on those concepts, which we then use to identify cultural and meta narratives that can be used as a narrative metaphor to accelerate understanding. These narrative metaphors, along with that foundation and stories based on our 3D story framework, are then used to create a strategic narrative. Customers have achieved things like 40% increased registrations for their event series by implementing our complete approach. This is our golden thread. After we applied our frameworks, we saw our deal sizes 10x in size. These engagements included multiple of our storytelling services. And of course, our favorite deliverable, the strategic narrative. Suffice to say, I'm thrilled. My journey with storytelling went from stories and hero's journey to brain science and the cogs of society. I learned that storytelling wasn't just to do with the telling of stories or even just a way of being interesting and engaging. I learned that there's a process that is fundamentally linked to how our brain works and how we see the world, how we communicate, and even the problem solving on which we embark. It fuels our lives and the businesses we run. I also learned how to align narratives to business and create a narrative that connects to a human understanding of the world as a bridge for your product or service. I learned how to use these narratives intentionally to create stories that align and inspire people to act. Now you have the secret. You will create energy and interest for your program, your campaign, your storytelling initiative itself. You'll build alignment and get people on board. You'll be able to engineer large-scale, meaningful narratives and campaigns that convert and trigger the right mix of hormone release at scale. This is storytelling for action. So let me ask you a question. If you followed what I showed you in secret number 1 and started crafting and telling compelling, practical business storytelling quickly, and then you did what I showed you in secret number 2 and ensured that those business stories connect and move customers to act, and then you use secret number 3 to tie all your stories and actions together by a narrative framework that is aligned to your business, do you think you could be successful? Do you think you could drive more demand? Do you think you could accelerate that sales pipeline? How many of you are feeling pretty excited right now? Pretty good, right? Well, how many of you are feeling a bit overwhelmed, like we've covered too much, drinking from the fire hose? I get it. It's impossible to cover everything in a 60-minute presentation. I had some presentation coaching one time, and the coach said to me, you can't cover everything. You know a lot about your brand, your products, your specific product and all its features and all that stuff. Well, your job to do in a presentation is to show people the next action, get them to commit to taking it. And, presenting for action is what that's all about. Storytelling for action. This is what I want to help you with. And that's why we're launching the Storytelling for Action pack. And here it is. You can be one of the first people to get access to this by signing up at this link. And you'll also get access to our other storytelling resources. We send a weekly newsletter with tips and tricks in it. And this pack consists of everything you need to get going with storytelling in business. 6 playbooks, a 12-part course covering all the elements of our frameworks and how to apply it in your business. Templates to utilize with your team, importantly. Lifetime access to our virtual clinic. A bonus customer advocacy pack as well. All results in our mission to help you. And we do it in 3 ways. We'll show you with that free content. We'll coach you through it. And if you need our help, we're around to help. Storytelling for Action is accessible to everyone, entrepreneurs, executives, marketers who are looking for an edge to bring storytelling into what you do. Some of you might need more help, and let us know if you do. So go ahead, go to gonarrative.com/SFA, and you'll be one of the first to hear about Storytelling for Action's general availability when we launch it in the very near future. Wow, we've covered a lot of ground. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited for Storytelling for Action. I'm going to stick around for a few minutes to answer questions. You can put those in the chat, and we'll talk about those. And we do this every week. So if you want to come back and get a refresher next week on the frameworks as you're trying to apply it yourself, trying to get going, trying to see how this stuff kind of works, come back next week, same time, same place, and we'll be going over it again. So some questions. So here's a question. Why don't you have heroes or things like that in your frameworks? That's right. Like desire, difficulty, denouement, no mention of hero, no mention of hero in the TRIPS framework, no mention of hero in the MEAT framework. It's intentional. Heroes are embedded into desire. Desire doesn't stand alone. It needs a person, right, to breathe life into it. And that person, that hero, is your customer. It's also why we don't talk about context or backstory. Sales storytelling for action includes hacks to help you include all the necessary elements at the right time, with lots and lots and lots of hacks and examples that are all within these easy to remember frameworks, so that you can just start applying it instantly. Another question here. What's the difference between transformation and change? They're basically the same thing, right? So you can kind of use them in maybe slightly different ways, but transformation is about a change that's happening in something. We like to talk about that change happens kind of at a macro level, right? Out in the market or a large audience, a very sort of large scale impact, meta, if you will. And then the organizations that are within that environment, companies or governments, for example, that transformation is affecting them and how they exist, how they do business, how they operate. And then there's the individual level. And you could also argue that there's some team level there with, you know, when you have a group of people who are working on something, but that individual gets affected too, right? So they get affected by the transformation. And so when you think about that kind of change and transformation, very much the same thing there. So let's see, what other questions do we have here? Do I need to remember the rising and falling action and the story arc? No, you don't. That's one of the good things about this. You don't have to worry about any of the entertainment frameworks. Those are great if you want to write a novel or a script for a film. There's a reason why those frameworks exist, and they are incredibly powerful. But applying them in business, you don't have time for that. That's why we've done what we've done and why we do what we do. So no, you don't have to worry about that character arc and so on. In fact, in our first ebook, which you can get from our website, there's going to be a new one with the Storytelling for Action program as well. But the current one, it talks about the fact that I don't like the idea of a story arc, right? A story arc implies kind of almost like you're getting back to where you started. We talk about a narrative mark, and we have some examples from some films. Oh, there's another question. Why you do mention films quite often? Why do they have nothing to do with this? Well, they do, right? There's a relationship to all this stuff. The reason why stories work, if you remember, is storytelling is a value problem. And those of us who survived till today came from a long line of people who effectively communicated valuable information that helped us stay alive, where the poisonous berries were, where the lions were, where the shelter was. And so those folks survived by their approach. And part of that approach was how they communicated this value. And so it's all storytelling is very much a value problem. And yeah, so really you want to think about communicating that value. Think about how you want to get that point across. And it's going to be interesting, or it's not going to be interesting, right? What's another word for interesting? Entertaining, right? So that approach was entertaining, and so it survived. And then is it surprising that a whole industry exploded out of that thing that humans discovered? No, it happens with everything we end up discovering. So entertainment industry, $100 billion industry, comes out of those roots, right? But those roots can grow in that direction and deliver those artifacts, or they can grow out in different directions. And how you use storytelling and the power of storytelling in business looks different to how you use it when you're making a movie. So that's why that's the case. Brilliant. Okay, we're 5 minutes past the hour. Thank you so much for turning up. If you have any questions as well, feel free to reach out, Matthew@gonarrative.com. Also, if you go ahead and go and sign up for the Storytelling for Action, that's those brackets are where the link's meant to be. The link's also at the bottom there, gonarrative.com/storytelling for action. And I can't wait to hear how you get on pursuing and applying storytelling in business and not having to worry about all of those entertainment frameworks. Thank you so much for joining today. We hope to see you next week. And for the time being, have a great week and have a great time telling some great business stories. Thank you and goodbye.